Welcome back, my friends, to the show where the NWO interference never ends. Wrestling at the Cow Palace used to set the wrestling world apart, but this particular event was more like a popcorn fart. I'm John Rant with the retro review of WCW Superbrawl 7 from the Cow Palace in San Francisco. 13,300 some odd fans got to see a show with so much goddamn NWO interference. I'm shocked that they just didn't have all the NWO members out there and just said, okay, go out there. Let's not even bother telegraphing it. Let's just tell the fans, yeah, you're going to get basically shat on, despite the fact that we had a really fucking loaded roster at this point. And I love WCW. I miss WCW to this goddamn day. I will miss it till the day I leave this earth. Because WCW was a great fucking alternative. The Monday Night Wars, even though there were a lot of messy moments from WWE, ECW, WCW, they all needed each other. And the Monday Night Wars were a hell of a goddamn time. Really fun. And 1997 in particular was the year where WCW was pounding WWE into the fucking dirt. They were beating them mercilessly. It was like RoboCop it was like the beginning of RoboCop on goddamn steroids, which actually kind of makes sense given how some of the talents looked at that point, but I digress. This was a lot of fun. This was just a great time period. It was so fucking cool. WCW, even though they were doing some shit that was just going tits up, they were printing money. They were selling out arenas. They had the loaded roster. WWE would eventually roar back and everything. Vince McMahon would be smarter with how he was doing some of the storylines, despite the fact that he had Vince fucking Russo and Ed fucking Ferrara, who, I would like to remind you, mocked JR's Bell's palsy on an episode of WCW Nitro, and I would like to say that Ed Ferrara deserves nothing but hatred and scorn for the rest of his goddamn life for that. And also Vince Russo was one of the worst things that happened to professional wrestling from a creative standpoint. But this is before that, because WCW didn't have Vince Russo. WWE did, but WCW had the Hot Hand, the NWO, and then events like this, where, my fucking goodness, everything that could have gone wrong basically did. Any of the stuff where it's like, oh, they could have had this good potential match. They had 5 championship matches. You know, a bunch of matches in total. Like, I mean, I believe about 10 matches. They had a couple dark matches. I believe it was Hugh Morris versus Joe Gomez and Ultimo Dragon, the Ultimate Dragon at the time, versus Pat Tanaka. Those were the dark matches. The Cow Palace has a rich history as far as the tradition of professional wrestling. You can look up events at the Cow Palace. San Francisco wrestling. Maybe it was California wrestling. I'm trying to remember what Roy Shire's actual company was. It might have been a variation of Big Time Wrestling, even though the Sheik had that in Detroit. But enough history. Let's talk about the fact that this pay-per-view had a tagline, and this was in the big one will hit San Fran when the big boys play. And get ready for the Rumble. That's an actual tagline for this event. So we start in Alcatraz, where Piper was locked up, and he was preparing to face Hogan. He was in isolation for 7 goddamn days. Why? I don't fucking know. I was watching television at the time. You know, I was watching both WCW and WWE. I couldn't goddamn tell you what the hell was going on. I couldn't fucking tell you why Piper was there. He felt he needed to mentally prepare and go absolutely unhinged to take down Hulk Hogan. A lot of fucking good it did him, given what happened in the event, because, whew, boy, that main event. You thought Starrcade 1996 was just basically built on nostalgia alone. They couldn't go the well a second time because it was not very good. Now, I will say that this pay-per-view was leagues and leagues better than the previous month's NWO Sold Out that I did retro review. You can check that out if you'd like. There were guards there to let him out, and Alcatraz had been a tourist attraction for a number of years. I guess it might have made more sense if, well, it wasn't so goddamn bonkers and stupid. And I love Piper. Piper's one of my favorites. I got the sweet shirt. I love Roddy Piper. Seriously, one of the best talkers, one of the best workers. He was great for a number of years. He was great in Portland. He was great, when Judo Gene LaBelle helped train him, and the whole thing he did with Chavo Guerrero Sr. and playing La Cucaracha instead of the Mexican national anthem. The time he had in Georgia, Jim Crockett Promotions, anywhere else, WWE. Even some of the stuff he did in WCW. Piper really does have a legendary career. Unfortunately, he had to keep working because of injuries, and he needed money. He wanted to get that nest egg for his family, and he passed away at 61, which was a shame. But he's like, I didn't spend 7 days in isolation for nothing. I mean, you kind of did by the end of it. This, by the way, took about up about the first 5 minutes of the program. And then Shivani, Heenan, and Dusty are on commentary. They recap Syxx stealing the U.S. title and then trying to steal the Cruiserweight title, and that would lead to this first match. The Superbrawl stage, the wide open thing where the entrance is here, and then a big old video screen on this side, and then they walk out. It always just looked weird to me. I don't know why it always bothered me, but it just looked too open. I mean, I'm not saying like you shouldn't protect the wrestlers, but it's like, have this big stage, but it just seemed like uneven. Like you should put the stage right in the, or the entrance right in the middle, and then put the video screens on the side. But anyway, we have Dean Malenko versus Syxx for the Cruiserweight Championship. Dean jumpstarts. He wants to beat down Syxx and kept pulling him up when he could have pinned him. That was his undoing. A dangerous Dean is an angry Dean. Strike that, reverse it. And Syxx does fire back. The pace was fine. We did get a nice top rope leg drop. Unfortunately, Syxx was not in a good place at this point in WCW. You could tell just his work was always very good. But he was going through a lot of struggles at this point. Hence why a lot of his WCW run is basically either him doing run-ins or spending time on the injury list. Because he was going through stuff, and thankfully he's clean now, but it was really, really rough, and it was really sad to see him like this. Eventually, Eddie Guerrero, who had been involved in this skirmish, wanted to try to prevent Syxx from winning. So he's trying to pull the title from him, and you can see where this is going. He gets knocked down, and then Syxx gets back up again, and then knocks Dean Malenko down, while the referee is uncertain about what happened, and then 1, 2, 3, Syxx is a Cruiserweight champion. Hooray! NWO bullshit. Not the end of it either. This is the quote from Bobby Heenan. A quote from Bobby Heenan, by the way, one of my favorites of all time. It was Eddie Guerrero's fault. That was La Bamba's fault. An actual line from Bobby Heenan. So, Mean Gene interviews DDP. Who is next from the NWO? It's going to be Buff. It's going to be Buff Bagwell. Because, DDP has to basically carry a sack of sand to a good match, which he can do. Conan, La Parka, the Uno 4 took on Juventud Guerrero, Super Calo, Calo, I think it's Calo, and Ciclope. And it was a car crash 6-man lucha match. It wasn't bad. It was certainly entertaining. It wasn't the worst thing I've seen. I don't know why they bothered having a referee get in the match until they wanted to make the final pinfall. But whatever. At one point, La Parka does he puts Super Calo in the seat and then does the dive, like he always does. And then we get the power drop. It's the pickup and the drop. 1, 2, 3, hence power drop. And Conan gets the victory. Let's move on to Prince Iakea versus Rey Mysterio. WCW TV Championship match. Prince Iakea had recently beaten William Regal for the TV Championship on a Nitro, I believe. I think it was a Nitro or Saturday Night. I think it was a Nitro. And Rey Mysterio was going to face him here, and Regal blamed Rey Mysterio for the loss because they were kind of trying to intermingle some feuds here. And Prince Iakea was a fine athlete. I just don't understand why they suddenly decided to give him the TV Championship. It didn't ultimately work. The crowd didn't really buy into him. They loved Rey, and there was a nice, it looked like he was going to rack him at one point on the top, Iakea, and he leaned back and he did a fall-away slam, which was pretty nice. There was a good pace here. Regal comes down, he attacks Rey, pulls him down off the apron, he hits the apron, throws him back in, Iakea covers 1, 2, 3, sees Regal and says, hey, wait a second, no, Rey, you should have the TV Championship. Rey's like, I didn't win it, what the hell's wrong with you? And I believe Tony Schiavone was quoted as saying, I've never seen anybody not want a championship in our great sport. That's fair. That's fair. Mean Gene interviews a Giant about the upcoming tag title match. Luger isn't medically cleared, so he will go it alone. Meaning they are telegraphing Luger is going to interfere. He will go it alone. He will not be rattled by Hall and Nash. Buff Bagwell versus DDP. Well, Buff, being a full-on dick heel, actually sued him just fine because he was very vain. He probably thought this company was about him. He's so vain. The crowd just, at one point, seemed distracted by something, maybe a fight in the crowd or something. I don't know. The crowd roared for DDP. Buff kept stopping the Diamond Cutter, kept trying to cheat to win. And eventually, Cutter to a huge pop. But then the NWO runs in. They don't touch DDP. DDP powders goes into the crowd, and the ref calls for a DQ. They didn't touch DDP, they ran into the ring, and the ref called for a DQ. And you see why I get frustrated rewatching some WCW pay-per-views and wondering, I don't know how WCW managed to have the advantage over WWE for 83 weeks consecutively, and then a number of weeks in 95 into 96 before they took over, and even some weeks in 98. until things just went tits up because, oh yeah, they killed the golden goose like the golden eggs and basically just made a bunch of little mistakes, and then the finger poke of doom and a bunch of other stuff that basically killed it. It was a 1-2 punch of Goldberg's streak and the finger poke of doom, and just finally pissing off the fans. So yeah, that was about it right there. I don't know why there was a DQ for no touching. No touchy, no touchy. So anyway, Chris Jericho took on Eddie Guerrero in the WCW US Championship match, and you would be remiss if you thought that the crowd had just vanished or died suddenly, because no, but barely any reactions. They didn't really have much of a story building into this. I remember Jericho talked about this match, and I don't know if they were teaming up and then had this match, or if they hadn't really had a story and then were teaming up a little bit afterwards, because I know they had a match at Fall Brawl 97. So the timeline's a little bit muddy to me, but I do remember Jericho talking about this where nobody reacted. Like, there were maybe 10% of the crowd might have cared, but 90% of the crowd in a pretty full Cow Palace didn't give a shit. And they were trying. This is probably one of the better pay-per-view matches that you will see that gets no crowd reaction. Like, none at all. And the effort was there. And this is when Jericho and Eddie were on the goddamn rise. You know, Jericho had been in wrestling since 1990 and had risen up and everything, doing his stints in Japan, doing his stints in Mexico, doing a brief stint in ECW, and had been in WCW for a bit. Eddie, same thing. You know, he had, Eddie, I believe, even wrestled on AWA Super Clash 3. And that was in the beginning of his career, but still, yeah, Super Clash 3. Check that out. Check out that, cast of characters and that cast of gimmicks and that cast of wrestlers. And then you might understand why the AWA was really, really struggling, having to, combine shows with other companies like World Class that was dead pretty much after that. So yeah, there were boring chants, and eventually Sunset Flip gets the victory. The crowd cheered because the match was over. That was the second longest match of the night. The timing of that and the Cruiserweight Championship match are the two longest matches of the night at just over 12 minutes each. And then Public Enemy, Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge took on Harlem Heat, Stevie Ray and Booker T, along with Sister Sherry, Sensational Sherry, my goodness, Sherry. And the Faces of Fear, Meng and Barbarian. Oh my god, Meng's here. Run. Three-way dance match. So apparently they seem to imply that this might be a number one contenders match, or not. Really hard to tell. It was messy. It wasn't dull, but it was messy. Because it was like 8 minutes and everybody just had to do their spots and do their stuff. And eventually we get a weird melee at the end. And Public Enemy wins by, a fluke. Rocco pins Barbarian. Hooray! Let's talk about Steve Mongo McMichael with Deborah taking on Jeff Jarrett in a grudge match. If Jarrett wins, he can be part of the Four Horsemen, which will make them more than Four Horsemen. Jarrett will also leave the company 6-7 months, no, not 8 months after this, something like that. Mongo would stick around until like February or March of 99. I think his last match. I don't remember if he had the match at Superbrawl 99, but I know he had a match just before. And Jarrett got a lot of pyro. More pyro than, a guy who has broken 6,000 guitars and never drawn a dime should ever fucking get. And at one point, and this is something that commentary mentioned, by the way. I want to emphasize that. Commentary mentioned this. A young girl in the crowd, has a sign because Deborah thought of herself as the queen of WCW, the prettiest there. And arrow's pointing down to this girl's probably 13, 14 years old. Girl's having fun, probably there with their parents or they were friends, whatever. And says, prettier than Deborah. And commentary talks kind of creepily about it. Go back and watch this. It was a bit uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. I hope whoever that young lady is grew up to, enjoy wrestling and everything and continue to enjoy it and pursue whatever life that she wanted. But my fucking goodness, if she rewatches, she'd be like, wow, that was weird. Anyway, this match wasn't very good. Bless Mongo. He tried. He just wasn't very good in the ring. Deborah wanted a fair match. She was actually playing favoritism towards Jarrett because she would go with Jarrett for a little bit. And even in the WWE. And we get a ref bump. And then the briefcase, the steel briefcase that Mongo had been carrying around that he had used on Kevin Green, that he had used before to gain the advantage. He ends up, trying to get it from Deborah. Deborah tosses it. Jarrett catches. Boom. Hits him in the head. 1, 2, 3. And there you go. That was pointless. And nothing is Mongo's a great athlete. He just had to be led because he was not natural. He tried. And later in the year, they would have him versus Reggie White in a 15-minute match on pay-per-view. And if you think it sounds bad, it's worse. So, Kevin Sullivan with Jaqueline. Thank you, Derb. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, best friend. I can never hear Jacqueline the same way. I always have to say Jaqueline. Taking on Chris Benoit, or by the way, Jimmy Hart was also there. Taking on Chris Benoit with Woman in a San Francisco death match. It's not the last time that Chris Benoit and Woman would be involved in a death match. If only they had tapped out. If you don't think this match was uncomfortable to watch, you don't know me very well. And if you don't think that I was, laughing uncomfortably at some of the lines and some of the actions here, you really don't know me very well. So, Woman and Jacqueline were strapped to each other. Not the last time the woman would be strapped, by somebody that she didn't want to be strapped by. Never turn your back on a woman with a strap. That's just common sense. At one point, Sullivan puts the strap over Benoit's throat and he dumped him over the top rope. He's gonna hang him. Oh. And yeah, this just got more and more uncomfortable. This is in that grudge feud that they had, where Sullivan had basically booked his own goddamn divorce. And boy, in retrospect, you know what? I'm not saying Sullivan was perfect, but boy, being with Chris, no, just wasn't good. By the way, the man went to the back while the women were strapping each other in the ring. And then they get back to the ring, and Shivani says, just going and watching this thing, makes you out of breath. Again, Suddenly, we get a table. We get a splash on the Sullivan and Jaqueline. Thank you again, Chris. 1, 2, 3. Not the last time that Benoit would put his hands on a woman, especially when she was laying face down to beat her down. And we have bodies everywhere was a line from Shivani. And then they said about Jaqueline, and her legs aren't moving. That would come about 10 and a quarter years later. This is uncomfortable. And they treated it like this serious thing where they were all being stretchered out. And the Atlanta PD weren't even there because it was outside their jurisdiction, like about 3,000 miles outside their jurisdiction. She's going to need woman's going to need some bandages too. I guarantee there's some marks on her. Again! So yeah, Uncensored Ad with Hugh Morris. That was fine, whatever. Outsiders, National Hall with 6, took on the Giant in a WCW tag title match. Luger was not medically clear as he had a cast on his hand. So the crowd wanted Luger, but Giant kept beating them 2-on-1, and 6 eventually interfered. He got a belt shot to the back of the head. Here comes Luger. Here comes Luger after a jackknife from Nash to the Giant, and that was dangerous because even though he was going up and preparing, I'm shocked he did not hurt himself. He probably tore his quad. I think he might have torn something because he was really holding his leg. He was really holding his leg and his back after that. Because that's a lot of goddamn weight to pick up. It wasn't as bad as, I believe, Sold Out 1998 when he dropped him on his head, but So anyway, Bischoff comes out here to stop Luger. Luger, throws him, gets the tag, and ends up getting the torture rack on Kevin Nash and gets the victory. Hooray! New tag team champions till the following night on Nitro, and Bischoff strips him. It was at that point the NWO stuff was getting old. So chokeslam to Hall afterwards, because of course, Hall really didn't want to go up for that, but Giant's like, no, you go. Hogan and Piper's entrances took 4 fucking years, and Hogan versus Piper for the WCW title. The crowd wanted Piper to win. I wanted this match to be over when the bell rang, and I respect the fuck out of what Hogan brought to wrestling, as far as name value and everything, and a lot of the iconic moments, and he did bring that. Savage is always better. Savage shows up a little bit later, and Piper praised him before. This was bad. This was really, really bad. All that isolation for Piper did fuck all of any good. Savage comes down after some interference. Wall Street comes down. The former IRS, the former Mike Rotunda. Captain Mike Rotunda. They made him a boat captain. Fuck you, Jim Herd. Fuck your mere existence. Fuck your parents for not practicing safe term. Anyway. So, Savage is out in black and silver. Sting is at the entranceway just watching. I always feel like some Sting is watching me. Anyway, we want Sting chants because the crowd was sick of this. Sleeper hold. Savage pulls Hogan's legs underneath. And the bell rang and oh my god, Savage won. Or not Savage, but Piper won. But Savage did this and then slips Hogan some brass knucks. Match restarts. Load a punch. 1, 2, 3. Piper gets pinned. And then they spray paint him. They The crowd was booing heavily. They spray paint him. Savage hits about 18 elbows on him. Hogan hits a couple leg drops, and that was it. That was your pay-per-view that people paid for, and man, it's amazing looking back on that WCW had any momentum at all with bullshit like that. Agree, disagree with what I said? Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.